Remote sensing technologies have discovered over 1,000 lost cities without a single shovel breaking the ground. By the end of this video, you will see 30 discoveries that rewrote history from orbit. These tools, LiDAR, ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery, and aerial photography, have peeled back layers of vegetation, soil, and time to reveal entire civilizations invisible to the naked eye. What lies beneath the jungles of Cambodia? What secrets do the deserts of Arabia still hold? The journey will span from Roman borders to Viking harbors, each finding a piece of a larger puzzle that remote sensing is helping to solve. What other secrets do you think the ground still hides? Deep in the Cambodian jungle, a hidden city was waiting. For decades, visitors to Angkor temples, soaring towers, and intricate carvings, but they saw only a fraction of the story. The sprawling complex of stone was long thought to be the centerpiece of a modest settlement, perhaps a ceremonial hub surrounded by a few villages. Then airborne LiDAR surveys transformed that picture forever. Flying over the dense forest canopy, lasers pierced the leaves and mapped the ground below with remarkable precision. What emerged was not a cluster of isolated monuments, but a vast, low-density metropolis stretching across hundreds of square miles. The data revealed an entire urban grid of roads, canals, and residential enclaves, all arranged in a carefully planned network that connected the famous temple to thousands of smaller structures. Over 1,000 new features were identified, including shrines, reservoirs, and earthworks that had been swallowed by vegetation for centuries. This discovery forced historians to completely rethink the Khmer Empire. Angkor was not a small religious center. It was one of the largest pre-industrial cities on Earth. The population estimates shot upward, and the sophisticated water management system, with its intricate canals and massive reservoirs, pointed to an advanced engineering culture that thrived for hundreds of years. The lessons from Angkor did not stay in Cambodia. This landmark survey became the template for LiDAR-based archaeology around the world. It showed that even the most familiar ancient sites could hide entire cities beneath their shadows, waiting for the right technology to bring them to light. And if Angkor could keep such a secret, what other forests might be guarding unknown worlds? In the dense forests of Belize, another lost city was hiding in plain sight. For years, the Maya site of Caracol was known primarily for its towering pyramid and carved monuments, but archaeologists had only scratched the surface. Then, in the early 2010s, airborne LiDAR surveys swept across the region, and what they revealed was nothing short of staggering. The laser data peeled away the thick canopy to expose an urban landscape far beyond anything scholars had imagined. Where researchers expected a modest ceremonial center, they found tens of thousands of structures spread across an area larger than many modern cities. This was not a simple cluster of temples and plazas. It was a sprawling metropolis. The LiDAR maps showed an intricate network of agricultural terraces carved into the hillsides, designed to feed a massive population. Long, raised causeways, known as sakbiob, connected distant neighborhoods, linking the city core to outlying districts and even to rival centers. And there were defensive walls, evidence that Caracol was not only a hub of trade and ceremony, but also a militarized state that competed fiercely with its neighbors. The sheer scale of the urban sprawl forced a complete rethinking of Maya civilization. These were not isolated city-states ruled by priest-kings in quiet jungle retreats. They were densely populated, politically complex, and highly organized societies that reshaped their environment on a massive scale. Remote sensing allowed researchers to quantify the size of Caracol with unprecedented precision. The data suggested that at its peak, the city may have housed well over 100,000 people. That meant Maya engineers had transformed the landscape into a carefully managed system of hillside farms, reservoirs, and road networks, all hidden beneath the trees for centuries. This discovery also shed new light on the eventual collapse of Maya political power. The very density and complexity that made Caracol thrive may have also made it vulnerable to prolonged drought or resource strain, ideas that remote sensing continues to help test. The implications did not stop at Caracol. Across the Maya lowlands, similar surveys began to paint a very different picture of the entire region. Where archaeologists once saw scattered villages and ritual centers, LiDAR revealed a patchwork of interconnected cities, each with its own agricultural infrastructure and defensive works. The eyes in the sky were showing that the Maya world was far more crowded, more contested, and more sophisticated than anyone had ever guessed. What other secrets were still hiding beneath the jungle canopy, waiting for the next laser pulse to bring them into the light? For centuries, Stonehenge stood alone on the landscape, or so it seemed. The iconic stone circle attracted tourists and researchers alike, all drawn to its mysterious alignment with the sun and the staggering effort required to move those massive stones. But the ground beneath the surrounding grass held a secret far bigger than the monument itself. In the early 2010s, a team of archaeologists launched one of the most extensive remote sensing surveys ever attempted at a World Heritage Site, covering an area of several square miles around Stonehenge. They used ground-penetrating radar, which sends pulses into the earth and listens for echoes of buried objects, and magnetometry, which detects tiny variations in the magnetic field caused by ancient features like ditches, pits, or hearths. The results were nothing short of revolutionary. Where the naked eye saw empty fields, the sensors revealed a hidden world of ritual structures, many of them completely unknown. The most dramatic discovery was a ring of enormous buried pits surrounding the Durrington walls, a nearby henge enclosure that had been only partially understood. These pits formed a massive circle nearly 2 miles in diameter, each one dug deep into the chalk bedrock. Together, they created a super henge, a ceremonial boundary far larger than the central stone circle itself. The data also showed the buried remains of dozens of sarsen stones, the same type of giant sandstone blocks used at Stonehenge, arranged in long alignments that once stood above ground. And there were hundreds of barrows, the ancient burial mounds that dotted the landscape, many of them previously unrecorded. Stonehenge was no longer an isolated monument. It was the heart of a sprawling ceremonial landscape, a network of processional routes, shrines, and gathering places that stretched for miles in every direction. Remote sensing allowed researchers to see that the Neolithic people who built Stonehenge did not just construct one great monument. They transformed an entire region into a sacred geography, connecting earth, sky, and ancestors in ways we are only beginning to understand. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this survey was that not a single shovel touched the ground. The technology did not disturb the turf, did not damage the fragile archaeology, and did not disrupt the visitor experience. This set a powerful precedent for how to investigate sensitive sites around the world, from ancient temples to battlefields without excavation. The message was clear. Some of the greatest archaeological secrets lie not beneath deep jungles or shifting deserts, but under the very grass we walk on. What other iconic landmarks might be hiding a forgotten landscape just below our feet? High in the Peruvian desert, the Nazca lines have fascinated the world for nearly a century. The vast geoglyphs of animals, plants, and geometric shapes etched into the arid plateau were first spotted from airplanes in the 1920s, sparking endless speculation about their purpose. But for decades, only a fraction of the total artwork was known. Even from the air, many of the smaller figures were invisible to the naked eye, faded by wind and sun, or simply too subtle to distinguish from the natural landscape. That changed dramatically when satellite imagery and drone-mounted sensors began to scan the region in high resolution over the past 2 decades. These tools, operating at wavelengths beyond human vision, could detect variations in the soil and rock that the eye could never see. One by one, new geoglyphs emerged from the data, and the pace of discovery accelerated. By the early 2020s, researchers had identified over 100 previously unknown figures scattered across the Nazca Plateau. These were not the massive, iconic shapes that tourists fly over, such as the hummingbird or the spider. Instead, they were smaller, often measuring just tens of meters across, and they depicted a different set of subjects: humanoid figures with elaborate headdresses, stylized animals like llamas and snakes, and abstract patterns that defied easy classification. The new finds redrew the entire typology of the Nazca lines. Instead of a uniform collection of large geoglyphs clustered along a few major lines, the plateau now appeared to contain a dense scatter of smaller ritual images, many of them associated with ancient pathways and ceremonial spaces. Remote sensing allowed archaeologists to see the full distribution for the first time. The smaller figures were not random. They seemed to mark routes or serve as waypoints for processions. This shifted the understanding of the lines away from a purely astronomical or calendar function and toward a more practical, ceremonial landscape used for gatherings and pilgrimages. The technology also became a powerful tool for conservation. Many of the Nazca lines are fragile and easily damaged by off-road vehicles, foot traffic, or natural erosion. Satellite images taken over months and years can detect subtle changes in the ground cover, alerting authorities to threats before they become visible on the ground. In some cases, new geoglyphs were found in areas already threatened by expanding settlements or agriculture, offering a chance to document and protect them before they vanish. By monitoring the landscape from above, researchers can track fading glyphs, map the spread of damage, and prioritize interventions. The Nazca lines were not static. They were a living, changing part of the desert, and remote sensing gave humanity a way to watch over them. The story of the Nazca Plateau did not end there. The same airborne scanning methods that uncovered hidden geoglyphs in Peru soon revealed other remarkable discoveries across the country, from ancient irrigation systems to pre-Inca settlements buried under centuries of soil. The desert was giving up its secrets, one laser pulse and pixel at a time. For decades, the Amazon was seen as a green desert, empty of civilization. The dense canopy of the world's largest rainforest seemed impenetrable, and the few scattered villages encountered by explorers reinforced a long-held image of small, isolated hunter-gatherer bands scratching out a living in a pristine wilderness. That image has been shattered by LiDAR surveys that cut through the foliage to reveal a landscape that was anything but wild. In the Llanos de Moxos region of Bolivia and the modern Brazilian state of Acre, remote sensing has uncovered a network of precisely geoglyph-enclosed settlements, raised causeways, and engineered fields that point to a sophisticated, populous, and ancient society. The geoglyphs themselves are striking. These are geometric shapes, circles, squares, and straight lines etched into the earth, often arranged in complex patterns. They were not visible from the ground, hidden under centuries of regrowth. Only when the laser pulses from overhead scanned the surface did they emerge, clear as day, as if drawn by a giant's hand. But these were not just art. They were the foundations of settlements delineated for some purpose, perhaps ceremonial or defensive. And around them, LiDAR detected a grid of raised fields, long mounds of earth that allowed farmers to drain the waterlogged soil and cultivate crops like maize, manioc, and squash. Causeways linked these fields to the central enclosures, creating a network of movement that suggests a highly organized society, one capable of mobilizing labor and resources on a large scale. Archaeologists had long debated whether the Amazon could support dense populations without industrial agriculture, The answer, as remote sensing now shows, was yes. The people of the Amazon did not simply adapt to the forest, they shaped it. They built terra preta, or dark earth, rich in charcoal and organic matter that remained fertile for centuries. They turned floodplains into productive farmland. They constructed earthworks that required planning and coordination. The LIDAR data redrew the map of pre-Columbian population density. The Amazon was not an empty wilderness. It was a garden built by human hands, a patchwork of settlements, fields, and forests that had been managed for thousands of years. This discovery also fuels a broader debate about Amazonian domestication. How much of the rainforest is actually a human creation? Many of the trees that dominate the modern Amazon, like Brazil nut and cocoa, are concentrated near ancient settlements, suggesting they were cultivated and encouraged by past populations. Remote sensing is now helping to map these patterns of human influence, showing that the line between wild and domesticated might be far blurrier than we ever imagined. The idea of a pristine wilderness is slowly giving way to a more complex story, one where humans were not just inhabitants but active engineers of their environment. The desert landscape of Petra, carved from rose-red sandstone, has drawn visitors for centuries, but its secrets do not end at the surface. High above the main canyon, the monastery, known as Ad-Der, stands as one of the most iconic structures in the ancient city. For years, archaeologists assumed that the massive facade was exactly what it appeared to be, an elaborate ceremonial space cut directly into the cliff face with a single large chamber behind it. Then ground-penetrating radar surveys began probing deeper. The technology sends a pulse of energy into the rock and listens for the faint echoes that bounce back from buried voids or changes in density. When researchers scanned the area around the monastery, the radar returned something unexpected. Beneath the floor of the main chamber, at a depth of several meters, a large, open space appeared. It was not a natural cavity. The size and shape of the void, combined with its careful alignment to the architecture above, suggested a man-made chamber, possibly a tomb or a hidden ritual room. This was a complete surprise. The Nabateans, who built Petra around the 1st century BC, were known for their skill in carving tombs and temples directly into the living rock. But this chamber had been sealed for nearly 2,000 years, invisible to anyone standing on the surface. The discovery immediately raised questions: who was buried there, what ceremonies might have taken place in that hidden space, and how many other chambers remain undetected throughout the sprawling site. The radar surveys did not stop at the monastery. Across Petra, the same non-invasive technique began to reveal a network of previously unknown tombs, many of them carved into the cliffs along the main approach to the city. Some were small, simple niches, others were larger, with multiple chambers connected by narrow passages, and beneath the famous treasury, or Al-Khosneh, the radar detected a series of voids that hinted at a complex underground system, perhaps a burial complex for the elite. The implications for understanding Nabatean funerary architecture are profound. Earlier interpretations assumed that most tombs were carved as single chambers for a single family or individual. But the radar data suggests a far more layered approach, with chambers stacked vertically or hidden behind false walls, creating a three-dimensional landscape of the dead. This points to a society that placed great importance on ancestral veneration and ritual, where the boundaries between the living and the honored departed were intentionally blurred. The water channels and cisterns that the Nabateans carved into the rock also came into clearer focus through remote sensing. Ground-penetrating radar traced the routes of underground aqueducts that fed fountains and pools, revealing a sophisticated hydraulic system that allowed a city of tens of thousands to thrive in an arid environment. The same technology that found hidden chambers was also mapping the veins of water that made Petra possible. What made these discoveries remarkable was their non-invasive nature. The sandstone of Petra is fragile, easily damaged by excavation or even by the touch of countless tourists. Traditional archaeology would require digging, drilling, or even the removal of stone, all of which risked permanent harm to the site. Ground-penetrating radar, by contrast, leaves no trace. It simply sends waves through the rock and records the echoes. This approach allowed researchers to explore deep beneath the surface without disturbing a single grain of sand. The results have set a new standard for how to investigate other arid world sites, from the tombs of the Valley of the Kings to the temples of ancient Yemen. The hidden chamber beneath the monastery is not the end of the story. It is a reminder that even the most famous ancient sites can still hold secrets, waiting for the right tool to reveal them. And as archaeologists refine these radar techniques and apply them to other desert landscapes, we can expect more subterranean discoveries to emerge, challenging everything we thought we knew about the people who once lived there. What other voids lie hidden beneath the sands, silent and untouched, until a pulse of energy brings them into the light? In the sands of Oman, another lost city waited to be found. For centuries, the story of Ubar had lived on only in whispers and ancient texts. It was called the Atlantis of the Sands, a wealthy trading hub that vanished beneath the desert, swallowed by a catastrophic collapse or simply abandoned to the wind. Legends spoke of a place built on the frankincense trade, where caravans carried precious resin across the Arabian Peninsula, but no one could say exactly where it had stood, if it had ever existed at all. Then, in the early 1990s, a remarkable collaboration between Nazca, a remote sensing specialists, and archaeologists turned the search high-tech. They used satellite synthetic aperture radar, a type of imaging that can penetrate dry sand and detect buried features, along with thermal imagery that picks up subtle temperature differences on the ground. When they scanned the Dhofar region of Oman, the data revealed a network of ancient trade routes that had long been invisible from the surface. Those paths converged on a single point, a spot marked by a faint depression in the landscape. The thermal images showed a darker patch, cooler at night, indicating that the ground there held more moisture or was made of different material than the surrounding desert. This was a collapsed limestone cavern. Over millennia, natural erosion had hollowed out a large chamber beneath the surface, and when the roof fell in, it created a natural pit that later became the foundation for a settlement. The remote sensing data suggested that this depression was the site of a significant ancient community, perfectly positioned along the frankincense route. Excavations followed, and at a place called Shisar, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a fortified settlement, complete with towers, courtyards, and evidence of long-distance trade in frankincense, pottery, and metals. The artifacts and radiocarbon dating matched the timeline of the legendary Ubar, a city that flourished in the Iron Age roughly 3,000 years ago. The discovery redrew the map of Arabian trade networks. Ubar was not a myth. It was a thriving hub that connected the incense-producing regions of southern Arabia to the markets of Mesopotamia, the Levant, and the Mediterranean. Remote sensing had pinpointed a site that traditional surveys had missed, buried under drifting sand and obscured by time. The partnership between space engineers and field archaeologists became a model for future projects, showing that the best way to find a lost city might be to look from hundreds of miles above the earth. The collapse of the limestone cavern, once a tragedy that may have ended the city, now became the very clue that allowed its rediscovery. What other desert legends might be grounded in reality, waiting for the right satellite to bring them back into history? Satellites have found hundreds of miles of the Great Wall that no one knew existed. For centuries, the image of the wall was simple, a single, continuous barrier snaking across northern China, built to keep invaders out. Tourists visited the most famous restored sections near Beijing, and historians studied the chronicles of the Ming dynasty. but the real wall, the one that was never a single line, remained hidden under drifting sand in the Gobi Desert and beneath thick vegetation in remote mountains. Starting in the early 2000s, high-resolution satellite imagery and aerial photography began to peel back those layers. What emerged was not a single wall at all. It was a sprawling network of branching walls, watchtowers, fortresses, and signal beacons that spread across thousands of miles, far beyond anything recorded in official histories. One of the most dramatic discoveries came in the Gobi Desert of Inner Mongolia. There, satellite images revealed a long section of wall completely buried by shifting sands. For decades, ground surveys had missed it because there was nothing to see above the dunes. Only the infrared and radar sensors aboard orbiting spacecraft could detect the subtle linear depression where the wall's packed earth and stone lay beneath the surface. Once identified, archaeologists confirmed it with ground-penetrating radar and limited excavation. The wall was still there, preserved in the dry sand, and it extended the known reach of the Ming defense system by hundreds of miles. In other regions, such as the forested hills of Liaoning and Hebei provinces, aerial photography from drones and planes showed walls overgrown with trees and scrub, their stone courses nearly invisible from the ground. The vegetation had hidden them so completely that even local villagers had no idea they walked past ancient fortifications every day. Remote sensing allowed researchers to distinguish the man-made wall segments from natural ridges and rock formations. The key was in the geometry. Natural features tend to meander irregularly, while human-built walls follow straight lines or gentle curves, often with evenly spaced watchtowers. By analyzing the patterns in the satellite data, archaeologists could map entire chains of fortifications that had never been catalogued. The discoveries changed the historical understanding of Ming-era defense strategy. The wall was not a single barrier meant to stop an invasion at one line. It was a layered system of secondary walls, forward outposts, and parallel barriers that could contain or channel enemy forces. In some areas, 3 or 4 walls ran side by side, creating a defended zone miles deep. This explained puzzling gaps in the historical record, where chronicles mentioned walls that no longer seemed to exist. They did exist, they had just been forgotten. The remote sensing data also revealed the true scale of construction. The total length of all Ming Dynasty wall segments, including those newly detected, may be well over 10,000 miles, far exceeding the commonly cited figure of about 5,000 miles. And the structure was not limited to the Ming Dynasty. Satellite images captured remnants of earlier walls built by the Han, Kai, and other states, often buried beneath later Ming construction. These earlier walls followed different alignments, showing how each dynasty adapted the defensive network to its own strategic needs. Beyond discovery, remote sensing became a powerful tool for preservation. The same satellite images that revealed hidden walls also showed how they were deteriorating. In some areas, illegal quarrying or road building had cut through ancient ramparts. In others, agricultural expansion or natural erosion was slowly leveling the remains. By monitoring the wall from orbit, conservation authorities could detect threats quickly and prioritize interventions. The technology allowed them to see the entire system at once, not just the most famous sections. The Great Wall was no longer a monument confined to tourist brochures. It was a living archaeological landscape, fragile and vast, that remote sensing helped to protect and understand. What other ancient defenses might still be hidden under sand and forest, waiting for a satellite to bring them back into the story of human ambition? Far from the deserts and jungles, another hidden city lay buried beneath the cornfields of the American Midwest. The great pre-Columbian metropolis of Cahokia, located near modern-day St. Louis, had long been recognized as a major archaeological site. Its central mound, Monk's Mound, rises 100 feet above the floodplain and served as the city's ceremonial heart. But for decades, the true scale of Cahokia remained hidden from view. Much of the ancient city had been plowed under by centuries of agriculture, its wooden structures rotted away, its defensive walls flattened to the ground. Only the largest earthworks survived as visible bumps in the landscape. Then, in the 2000s, a new wave of remote sensing surveys began to peel back the layers. Archaeologists deployed LiDAR from aircraft to map the subtle contours of the ground, and they used ground-penetrating radar and magnetometry to probe beneath the soil. The results were a revelation. The LiDAR data, recorded when the fields were bare, showed a dense grid of residential mounds, many of them previously unknown, arranged in precise alignments that suggested careful urban planning. Thousands of house platforms, each one a low rise of earth that once supported a timber-framed dwelling, appeared in the scan data. They filled the spaces between the larger ceremonial mounds, forming neighborhoods that stretched for miles. And the magnetometry surveys, which detect changes in the Earth's magnetic field caused by ancient features like fire pits or compacted floors, revealed the outlines of hundreds of houses arranged around open plazas. The city was not a loose collection of farmsteads scattered around a central plaza. It was a densely packed urban center, with a population that may have reached up to 20,000 people at its peak around the year 1100. That made Cahokia one of the largest cities in the world at that time, comparable in size to London or Paris. The remote sensing data also brought to light the massive wooden palisade that once encircled the city. This was not a simple fence. The palisade was a formidable defensive wall, built with thousands of logs set deep into the ground and reinforced with bastions at regular intervals. The magnetometry and ground-penetrating radar traced its full circuit, a line of closely spaced post holes that ran for over 2 miles around the central precinct. The wall had been rebuilt at least 4 times, each expansion suggesting that the city needed to protect its growing population or its social elites during periods of political upheaval. The discovery of the palisade changed the understanding of Cahokia's history. It was not a peaceful, open settlement where everyone lived in harmony. It was a heavily fortified capital, one that invested enormous labor into defense, a sign of social hierarchy and competition. The palisade also defined the boundaries of the city's most sacred space, separating the ruling class and the great mounds from the surrounding neighborhoods. Remote sensing allowed archaeologists to see this division for the first time. Beyond the residential mounds and the palisade, the surveys identified a network of borrow pits, the holes from which the earth for the mounds was dug. These pits, some of them 2 acres in size, later filled with water and became part of the city's water management system. They were connected by drainage channels and causeways, showing that Cahokia's engineers had reshaped the floodplain to control flooding and to move people and goods efficiently. The scale of earth moving was staggering. Millions of basket loads of soil had been carried by hand to create the mounds and the platform for Monk's Mound alone. The technology that revealed all this was non-invasive. Traditional excavation would have taken decades and destroyed the very features it aimed to study. Instead, the magnetic sensors and radar pulses mapped the entire city, 1,000 acres of buried history without disturbing a single corn stalk. The data redrew the map of Mississippian urban planning. Cahokia was not an outlier. It was the center of a network of smaller towns and ceremonial centers that stretched across the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys. But its size and complexity marked it as something special. The surveys also showed that the city's layout was oriented to the cardinal directions, with the main axis aligned to the north-south line and the eastern sunrise at the equinox. This was not random. The planners had laid out the city according to a cosmological plan, linking their earthly capital to the sky. New discoveries continue to emerge from the farmland around Cahokia. Even now, LiDAR scans detect subtle rises and depressions that indicate another mound, another plaza, another section of the palisade that had been flattened by the plough. The site is a palimpsest, with each generation of technology able to read more of the faint handwriting left by the people who built this city. The fields that look flat and featureless to a farmer's eye hold the ghost of a metropolis, waiting for the right sensor to bring it back to life. What other lost cities might be hiding under our own farmland and backyards, silent and invisible until we learn to see them from above? In central Germany, beneath quiet farmland, another lost city lay waiting to rewrite history. For decades, the conventional story of the Roman Empire in Germania was simple. After the devastating defeat in the Teutoburg forest around 9 CE, the Romans pulled back behind the Rhine and never seriously tried to establish a permanent civilian presence east of that river. The idea of a Roman province stretching into the heart of Germany seemed like a failed dream, abandoned after a single disastrous campaign. But in the 1990s, aerial photography and a technology called magnetic gradiometry began to chip away at that neat narrative. The surveys focused on a site near the modern village of Waldgerms in the state of Hesse. From the air, the patterns of crop marks and subtle soil discolorations revealed something unexpected. A carefully laid out grid of streets and buildings, far too organized to be a simple military camp. Magnetic gradiometry, which measures tiny variations in the Earth's magnetic field caused by buried walls, hearths, and pits, confirmed the grid. The sensors traced the outline of a forum, the central public square that was the hallmark of a Roman civilian town. In the middle of that forum, the data showed a rectangular depression, and when archaeologists excavated that spot, they found fragments of a gilded bronze horse statue, likely part of an equestrian monument to the Emperor Augustus. This was not a frontier fort. It was a planned civilian capital, a city meant to be the administrative heart of a new Roman province called Germania Magna. The forum, the statue fragments, the layout of streets and public buildings, all of it pointed to a level of ambition that historical texts had never fully captured. The Romans had not just crossed the Rhine on raids or short-term campaigns. They had begun to build a permanent governmental center, complete with the symbols of imperial authority. The intended capital was designed to house officials, merchants, and the apparatus of Roman law and taxation. The statue fragments alone were significant. Gilded bronze was expensive and reserved for the most important monuments. To install such a piece at Waldgerms meant that the site was intended to be a showcase of Roman power, a statement that this land was now part of the empire. But the city was never finished. The archaeological layers show that construction stopped abruptly around 9 CE, the year of the Teutoburg disaster. The stone foundations were left incomplete, the forum was never paved, and the statue was apparently broken up and discarded. The imperial dream east of the Rhine collapsed almost as soon as it began. Yet the site did not disappear. It was simply abandoned, and over centuries the ruins sank back into the soil, covered by ploughing and natural erosion, forgotten until remote sensing brought them back to light. The discovery of Waldgerms redrew the map of Roman occupation in Germania. It pushed the limit of planned settlement well beyond the Rhine, showing that the Romans had not only conquered territory, but had begun the process of integrating it into the empire's civil structure. The site also sparked a fierce debate among historians. Some argued that Waldgerms was an outlier, a short-lived experiment that proved the Romans were not serious about permanent colonization. Others pointed to the scale and investment as evidence that the empire had every intention of staying, and that only the military disaster stopped them. The debate continues, but one thing is certain: the traditional view of a simple, static frontier has been shattered. The Romans were more ambitious, and their plans more extensive than anyone had guessed. Remote sensing did not just find a lost fort, it found the ghost of a province that almost was. What other evidence of abandoned imperial ambitions might still lie beneath European fields, waiting for a magnetic pulse to bring them into the light? 1,000 years ago, Norse sailors crossed the North Atlantic and built the first European settlement in the Americas. That story was long known from the sagas, but the physical proof remained elusive until the discovery of El Ants Ox Meadows in the 1960s. For decades, the site on the northern tip of Newfoundland appeared to be a small, temporary outpost, a cluster of 3 turf halls where a handful of explorers spent a few seasons before abandoning the New World. That picture has been transformed by satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar. Starting in the early 2000s, archaeologists began scanning the landscape around the original excavation. The satellite images showed subtle linear features in the grass, hints of walls that had been hidden under centuries of peat and moss. Then the ground-penetrating radar confirmed what those hints suggested. The settlement was much larger than anyone had imagined. The radar pulses traveled through the damp soil and bounced back from buried turf walls and compacted floors, revealing the outlines of at least 6 additional structures beyond the original 3. Among the new finds was a possible smithy, a building dedicated to ironworking, complete with a hearth and fragments of slag that indicated the Norse were not just repairing tools but producing new metal from local bog iron. There were also long, narrow depressions that matched the shape of boat sheds, places where the Norse could haul their knars and smaller vessels out of the water for repairs and shelter. This redrew the map of Norse exploration in North America. El Ants Ox Meadows was not a tiny camp visited by a single expedition. It was a base of operations, a gateway for further exploration into the Gulf of St. Lawrence and the rich timberlands of what is now New Brunswick. The presence of a smithy meant the Norse were equipped to maintain their ships and fabricate hardware for larger structures, suggesting a more permanent intention than previously believed. The boat sheds hinted at a fleet of vessels, not just a single ship. The settlement could have housed several dozen people, perhaps more, with specialized crafts and a planned layout. The technology that uncovered these structures was non-invasive. Ground-penetrating radar did not require digging up the fragile turf, which is protected as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Instead, the sensors mapped the entire area without disturbing a single blade of grass. This allowed archaeologists to understand the full extent of the Norse footprint without compromising the integrity of the landscape. The discoveries also forced a rethink of the Norse sagas. The sagas speak of a place called Vinland, where the land was rich with wild grapes and the climate milder than Greenland. El Ants Ox Meadows does not match that description perfectly, but the new evidence suggests that the site was a forward operating base from which Viking explorers traveled south to find the grape-bearing regions. The settlement itself was the staging ground for those journeys, the hub from which the Vinland sagas unfolded. The data from the radar surveys continues to be analyzed, and each new scan reveals faint traces of activity, cooking pits, hearths, and even the outlines of small structures that may have been workshops or storage sheds. The Norse presence in North America was not a fleeting episode. It was a well-organized, multi-year endeavor with an infrastructure of metalworking, boat repair, and shelter. Remote sensing has given us a window into that world, showing that the sagas were not just stories, but memories of a real and ambitious chapter in human history. What other Viking landing sites might still be hidden along the coasts of Canada or the northeastern United States, waiting for the right radar signal to bring them out of the earth? Radar waves from the space shuttle peered through the jungle canopy to reveal a hydraulic empire. For decades, the famous temples of Angkor in Cambodia were admired for their towering stone faces and intricate carvings. But the landscape around them seemed to be a patchwork of scattered moats and ponds, a modest water system for a ceremonial center. Then the shuttle radar topography mission, a Nazca instrument that flew aboard the space shuttle in the year 2000, began to map the Earth's surface in 3 dimensions. When researchers analyzed that data over Angkor, they saw something that had been invisible from the ground and even from standard aerial photos. The radar images showed a network of perfectly straight linear channels, hundreds of feet long, radiating outward from the main temple complex and connecting to the Tonle Sap Lake, the great freshwater reservoir of Southeast Asia. These were not natural streams, they were man-made canals carefully engineered to carry water across the flat floodplain, and they were not isolated. The radar revealed a grid of secondary channels like the veins of a leaf, linking dozens of small reservoirs and temple moats into a single, integrated system. The scale was breathtaking. The ancient Khmer engineers had transformed hundreds of square miles of seasonal floodplain into a managed water landscape. They built massive rectangular barrays or reservoirs, some of them over 5 miles long, to capture monsoon rains and store them for the dry season. The water was then distributed through the canal network to rice fields, to temple precincts, and to the city's households. The entire urban center of Angkor, home to perhaps 1 million people at its peak, was a hydraulic city, a place where survival depended on a carefully balanced system of flow and storage. Later satellite sensors, including advanced radar and multispectral images, refined the picture. They showed how the canals were aligned to the natural slope of the land, using gravity to move water without pumps. They revealed the locations of sluice gates and control points where officials could regulate the flow, and they traced the routes by which excess water was channeled back to the Tonle Sap, preventing the city from flooding during the rainy season. This was not a simple irrigation network. It was a sophisticated piece of civil engineering, built and maintained over centuries. But the same data that revealed the system's brilliance also hinted at its fragility. The radar images showed that many of the canals had been deliberately modified over time, widened, narrowed, or rerouted. That pattern of constant adjustment suggested that the system was under stress. The natural landscape of the Angkor region is a low-lying floodplain, and the canals were prone to silting. As the population grew and the city expanded, the demand for water increased, and the hydraulic network had to work harder to keep up. Remote sensing allowed researchers to trace the sedimentary deposits in the canals, the layers of sand and silt that accumulated over the centuries. Those deposits told a story of gradual decline. The flow slowed, the channels clogged, and the majestic system that had once sustained the largest urban complex of the pre-industrial world began to fail. Historical records and archaeological evidence already suggested that Angkor went through a period of prolonged drought in the 14th and 15th centuries. The remote sensing data added a new dimension to that story. When the monsoon rains became less reliable, the already stressed canal system could not adapt quickly enough. The water became scarcer, the rice harvest shrank, and the political and religious authority that depended on the annual abundance of water began to weaken. The city did not fall to invaders. It was undone by the slow, silent breakdown of its own hydraulic infrastructure, a collapse driven by environmental stress that remote sensing helped to reveal. The Khmer example is not a cautionary tale from a distant past. It is a clear lesson in the vulnerability of complex societies to environmental change. Remote sensing gave archaeologists the ability to see the full extent of the water management network, not just the fragments that survived above ground. It allowed them to understand the system as a whole, a single, integrated organism that breathed water across the landscape. And it provided a lens through which to see the seeds of decline, slighted canals and altered flow patterns that were hidden under the forest floor. The same tools are now being used to study other ancient hydraulic societies, from the rice terraces of the Philippines to the irrigation systems of Mesopotamia. Each discovery adds a piece to a larger understanding of how human communities have shaped their environments, and how those environments have, in turn, shaped human history. What other fragile networks of water might be waiting beneath the soil, ready to tell their stories through the echoes of radar? In Myanmar, the lasers peeled back the jungle to reveal a sea of temples. For centuries, the plains of Bagan had been admired for their iconic skyline, hundreds of towering stupas and pagodas dotting the landscape, a testament to the devotion of the pagan kingdom. But the true scale of this sacred city remained hidden under a dense carpet of thorn, scrub, and acacia trees, vegetation that had reclaimed the spaces between the most famous monuments. Then an airborne LiDAR survey swept across the region, and the data that came back redrew the map of medieval Burmese architecture. The sensors counted not hundreds but well over 10,000 individual structures, many of them small, unstudied temples and shrines that had been completely swallowed by the vegetation. For decades, visitors and even archaeologists had walked right past these sites, their walls crumbling under a canopy of leaves, their foundations obscured by soil and roots. The LiDAR data showed them in stunning detail: the faint rectilinear outlines of brick platforms, the outlines of collapsed stupas, the subtle depressions that marked the remains of monastic complexes. This was not a scatter of isolated monuments. It was a dense urban fabric of religious architecture, a city of worship that stretched across the floodplain of the Irrawaddy River. The new count meant that Bagan was not just a collection of a few thousand structures, but a vast ceremonial landscape where every neighborhood, every crossroads, every rise in the ground had been marked by a symbolic or funerary building. The density of such structures reshaped the understanding of the pagan kingdom itself. This was not a modest kingdom with a few grand temples built by wealthy kings. It was a deeply pious society where patronage of religion extended down to the level of individual villages and families, each building a small stupa or shrine as an act of merit. The LiDAR survey also became an essential tool for conservation. In 2016, a powerful earthquake struck central Myanmar, damaging hundreds of temples in Bagan. The initial damage assessments were done on the ground, a slow and dangerous process, but when researchers compared before and after LiDAR scans, they could see exactly which structures had shifted, which walls had cracked, and which foundations had been destabilized. The detailed elevation models revealed millimeter-scale changes that were invisible to the naked eye. This allowed the government and heritage organizations to prioritize the most urgent repairs, focusing resources on the temples that were in imminent danger of collapse. The same technology also identified previously unknown voids and weaknesses inside the brickwork, hidden chambers or cracks that could be reinforced before they caused further damage. Bagan was no longer just a living museum. Its fragility was now measured and monitored from the air. The success of the Bagan survey inspired similar efforts across Southeast Asia. In Thailand, LiDAR scans of the ancient capitals of Sukhothai and Ayutthaya have begun to reveal buried moats, wall systems, and water management networks that were too subtle to see from the ground. In Laos, radar and LiDAR are mapping the massive stone jaws of the Plain of Jars, searching for hidden burial chambers beneath the surface. The tools that found 1,000 lost temples in Myanmar are now being used to protect and understand the entire religious and urban landscape of the medieval Buddhist world, one laser pulse at a time. Beneath the cobblestones and ancient walls of Jerusalem, a hidden city has been quietly mapped. Ground-penetrating radar surveys beneath the old city have revealed an extensive network of tunnels, cisterns, and quarries that date back to the First Temple period and beyond. The radar pulses travel through layers of plaster, stone, and soil, bouncing back from voids that have been sealed for millennia. What emerges is a three-dimensional map of a city that was much more vertically integrated than any written record ever suggested. These are not natural caves, they are carefully cut chambers, some with ceilings supported by pillars of living rock, others connected by narrow passages wide enough for a single person to pass. Some of the shafts plunged dozens of feet into the limestone bedrock, leading to vast halls where stone blocks were once extracted for the temple and the city walls. The scale of this underground infrastructure is staggering. It shows that ancient Jerusalem was not just a city on a hill, but a city carved into the hill itself, with residents moving water, storing goods, and even conducting ritual ceremonies in spaces that were hidden from the sun. Interpreting the radar data in such a densely layered urban environment is a formidable challenge. Every century has left its own signature: Roman paving stones, Byzantine cisterns, Crusader tunnels, Ottoman sewers. The signals from the ground-penetrating radar must be carefully separated to distinguish the deep, ancient features from the later additions. Yet the data has been clear enough to identify previously unknown quarry chambers that supplied stone for King Herod's expansions and perhaps for Solomon's original temple. These discoveries redraw the map of ancient Jerusalem's infrastructure, showing that the city's reach extended far below the surface. The same technology is now being used to trace the path of the ancient water system that brought the Gihon Springs flow into the heart of the city, a feat of engineering that made Jerusalem viable for centuries. The ground beneath the holy sites is becoming less a mystery and more a document, each void and chamber a sentence in a story that was never written down. And as the data accumulates, it raises a quiet question. What other secrets lie in the spaces between the layers, waiting for the right frequency to bring them into the light? A void big enough to hold a jetliner sits hidden inside the Great Pyramid of Giza. For centuries, the internal structure of this 7-million-ton monument had been understood only through narrow passageways and chambers known since antiquity. There was the Grand Gallery, the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, and a few small shafts, but the rest of the pyramid was assumed to be solid stone, a dense core of limestone blocks laid by tens of thousands of workers. Then the Scan Pyramids project, an international collaboration of scientists from Egypt, France, Japan, and elsewhere, turned to a technology that seemed more suited to particle physics than archaeology. They used muon tomography. Muons are subatomic particles that rain down from space, produced when cosmic rays collide with atoms in the upper atmosphere. These particles pass through matter, but they lose energy as they go. Dense materials like stone absorb them faster than empty spaces. By placing sensitive detectors inside the pyramid, deep in chambers and passages, researchers could measure how many muons made it through the stone. More muons meant less stone, and that is exactly what they found. In 2017, the team announced the discovery of a massive void above the Grand Gallery, a space at least 100 feet long and perhaps 30 feet high. They called it the Big Void. Its volume is comparable to that of the Grand Gallery itself. The data from multiple detectors, placed at different locations and angles, all pointed to the same large, low-density area. It was not a natural fissure or a construction gap. It was a carefully designed chamber, sealed for over 4,000 years, its purpose unknown. The discovery redrew the internal map of the Great Pyramid. No longer could the monument be seen as a simple arrangement of known rooms. There was a hidden space, a secret at the very heart of the pyramid. Theories ranged from a burial chamber for a different pharaoh to a construction ramp that was never removed to a symbolic space representing the celestial underworld. But the muon data could not tell what was inside the void, only that it existed. Ground-penetrating radar surveys of the same area added further detail. The radar waves bounced back from the boundaries of the chamber, showing that it was not only large but also had a distinct shape, with a flat floor and a sloping ceiling. That shape matches the profile of the Grand Gallery, leading some to wonder if the Big Void is a mirror image, a twin gallery hidden above the known one. The Scan Pyramids project did not stop at the Great Pyramid. They placed muon detectors inside the Pyramid of Khafre, the second largest at Giza, and inside the Bent Pyramid and the Red Pyramid at Dosha. In each case, the data revealed subtle anomalies, smaller voids or differences in density that hint at internal features not recorded by any ancient text. Some of these may be corridors, others might be chambers. A few could be construction ramps left inside the core, evidence of how the Egyptians built these colossal structures. What makes these discoveries so remarkable is that nothing was disturbed. No drill bit, no jackhammer, no chisel touched the ancient stone. The information came from particles that traveled halfway across the universe before passing through the pyramid walls. It is the most non-invasive way to look inside a monument ever devised. Each new muon scan increases the resolution of the internal map. The more detectors placed, the more angles recorded, the clearer the image becomes. And each refinement raises a tantalizing question. If the Great Pyramid has a hidden void, what might the other pyramids contain? Are there secret chambers waiting to be found inside the pyramids of Giza, in the tombs of the Valley of the Kings, or in the temples of Luxor? Cosmic rays are now the archaeologist's camera, capturing images of spaces that have been dark for millennia. The true shape of the pyramid's interior is still being drawn, line by line, from the tracks of invisible particles. Beneath the Pyramid of the Sun, an unseen city was hiding. For decades, Teotihuacan's vast ceremonial center, with its famous Avenue of the Dead and towering pyramids, was understood as a loosely arranged sacred precinct. But aerial photography from the mid-20th century began to hint at something far more systematic. When researchers examined the black and white images taken from aircraft, they noticed faint linear patterns crossing the ground, straight lines that did not follow the natural terrain. These were not roads or modern boundaries. They were the ghostly outlines of an ancient street grid, laid out with remarkable precision over several square miles. Ground-penetrating radar surveys later confirmed what the photographs suggested. The sensors sent pulses into the soil and detected the buried stone foundations of walls, platforms, and causeways that formed a perfect orthogonal grid. Teotihuacan was not a collection of monuments scattered across the landscape. It was a highly planned metropolis, with its streets aligned to the cardinal directions and its buildings arranged in blocks, just like a modern city. The grid predated the Aztecs by nearly 1,000 years, and it showed that the culture that built this city possessed advanced knowledge of surveying and urban design. The radar also revealed a network of caves beneath the Pyramid of the Sun, chambers that had been sealed and forgotten for centuries. The sensors traced the outlines of natural lava tubes that were later modified and expanded by human hands. Inside those cavities, archaeologists using ground-penetrating radar in a follow-up survey detected dense clusters of objects that turned out to be offerings, ceramic vessels, obsidian blades, and the remains of ceremonial activity. These were not simply storage spaces. They were ritual chambers, places where the people of Teotihuacan connected with the underworld, a concept central to Mesoamerican belief. The caves were oriented to the same grid as the surface city, suggesting that the underground world was as carefully planned as the one above. The ability to detect subsurface stone alignments without excavation was crucial. Traditional digs would have taken years and risked damaging the fragile cave deposits. Instead, the radar created a three-dimensional map of the city above and the caves below, revealing a total area of urban planning far beyond what earlier archaeologists had mapped. The grid extended to the Ciudadela, the great plaza complex that contained the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, showing that even the most sacred spaces were integrated into the larger layout. Teotihuacan was not a chaotic accumulation of buildings. It was a single, unified design, a city built from the ground up with a vision that still impresses modern urban planners. The discoveries redrew the map of the ancient metropolis. showing that its influence stretched not only across the landscape but deep beneath it, into chambers that held the hopes and offerings of its people. What other planned cities might still be hiding their true dimensions under our feet, waiting for a radar pulse to reveal their original blueprints? On the plains of Pakistan, another planned city is slowly dissolving. Mohenjo-Daro, one of the greatest achievements of the Indus Valley civilization, has faced an invisible enemy for decades: salt. The same soil that preserved its mud brick walls for 4,000 years now draws moisture from the ground, carrying dissolved salts to the surface. When the water evaporates, the salt crystallizes, prying apart the ancient bricks from within. Entire sections of the city have crumbled into dust, their precise grid of streets and houses lost to view. But satellite remote sensing has begun to fight back, capturing images across visible and infrared wavelengths that reveal the damage before it becomes catastrophic. The sensors detect the telltale white crust of salt efflorescence on the bricks, areas where the decay is accelerating. By comparing images taken months or years apart, conservation teams can map the spread of the salt damage and prioritize the most threatened structures for protective treatments, like applying a clay and lime slurry that shields the bricks from further moisture. The same satellite data, however, has also done something remarkable. It has redrawn the map of the original city. Beneath the eroded surface, the subtle variations in soil moisture and compaction create faint patterns that the satellite's enhanced spectral bands can pick up. Those patterns trace the outlines of streets and alleyways that have long since been flattened by time, revealing a denser and more extensive urban grid than any ground survey had ever recorded. The new imagery shows that Mohenjo-Daro was not a loose collection of residential blocks surrounding a few public baths and granaries. Its layout followed a carefully planned orthogonal grid, with main thoroughfares running north-south and east-west, and smaller lanes branching off at regular intervals. The residential areas were organized into distinct neighborhoods, each with its own network of wells and drainage channels. The satellite data even hints at previously unknown structures beneath the surface, perhaps a second great bath or a large assembly hall, their foundations still intact under the salty crust. This information is reshaping the academic understanding of Harappan urban design, showing a level of standardization and centralized planning that rivals the later Roman cities. The grid system was not a rigid imposition, though. It adapted to the local topography, with some blocks slightly wider or narrower to accommodate the bend of the Indus River channel. The conservation guidance derived from the satellite imagery is equally vital. By identifying the zones of fastest erosion, restoration crews can dig only where necessary, sparing the fragile ruins from unnecessary disturbance. The same remote sensing tools that map ancient street patterns also monitor the shifting course of the Indus, warning when the river encroaches too close to the archaeological site. Mohenjo-Daro is not a static relic. It is a living document, and the satellites are its most careful readers, preserving the story of a city that once stood at the heart of a vast and sophisticated civilization. The same satellites that monitor crumbling bricks also trace ancient military frontiers. Along the northern edge of the Roman Empire, a wall of stone and turf once stretched from coast to coast, marking the boundary between Roman Britain and the lands beyond. For centuries, historians have studied Hadrian's Wall as one of the best-preserved Roman frontiers in the world. Its forts and mile castles have been mapped, excavated, and turned into tourist attractions. But the picture was never complete. Vast stretches of the wall's hinterland, the areas behind the main barrier where troops were stationed and supplied, remained hidden under fields, forests, and modern towns. Then infrared satellite imagery and geophysical surveys began to peel back that blanket. The sensors, flying aboard satellites and drones, detected subtle differences in soil temperature and moisture that revealed the buried foundations of structures no one knew existed. One of the most dramatic discoveries came at Meroport, a site on the coast of Cumbria at the western end of the wall. For decades, archaeologists knew of a Roman fort there, but its size and layout remained uncertain. The ground-penetrating radar surveys changed that completely. The radar waves traveled through the topsoil and bounced back from the stone walls of a massive fort, far larger than the visible remains suggested. The data showed a sprawling military base with multiple barracks blocks, granaries, a headquarters building, and even a bathhouse. The fort had been designed to house not just a few hundred soldiers, but a full auxiliary cohort, perhaps 1,000 men, plus their horses and support staff. The discovery redrew the military map of the entire region. Meroport was not a small outpost. It was a major garrison center, a hub that could project power deep into the territory of the tribes to the north. The same satellite and geophysical surveys also detected a series of temporary marching camps along the wall. These were not permanent stone forts. They were short-term encampments, used by legions on the move or by construction crews working on the wall itself. The outlines of these camps, shallow ditches and ramparts that had long since been plowed flat, appeared in the infrared data as faint rectangular shadows. Dozens of them now dot the landscape, showing that the Roman military presence along the wall was far more dynamic and mobile than anyone had guessed. The wall was not a static line. It was a system of constant movement, with troops rotating through temporary camps, conducting patrols, and responding to threats. The remote sensing surveys covered the entire length of the wall, a distance of over 70 miles, in a fraction of the time that ground surveys would have required. Where a team of archaeologists on foot might take years to search a few miles of terrain, the satellites and airborne sensors mapped hundreds of square miles in a single pass. This efficiency allowed researchers to see the wall as a whole system, not as a collection of isolated forts. The data revealed that the density of Roman military installations was far higher than historical records suggested. The wall was not a simple line of forts spaced a few miles apart. It was a layered defense zone with forward outposts, rear supply depots, and communication towers linked by a network of roads. The entire landscape of northern Britain had been militarized. The discovery of the Meroport fort and the temporary camps does not just add dots to a map. It changes the understanding of how the Romans controlled this volatile frontier. The wall was not a passive barrier. It was an active military zone, a place where thousands of soldiers lived, trained, and prepared for conflict. The infrared and radar data bring that world into sharper focus, showing the infrastructure that supported the legions and the logistical backbone that made the wall possible. The same tools that found a lost fort in Cumbria are now being used to search for other Roman military sites across Britain, from the Antonine Wall in Scotland to the Saxon shore forts in the southeast. Each new detection fills in another piece of the puzzle, revealing the true scale of Rome's northern defenses. What other hidden forts might still lie beneath the fields of Britain, waiting for the right wavelength of light to bring them back into history? The lasers revealed more than just canals beneath Angkor's canopy. The same LiDAR surveys that mapped the Khmer water system also brought to light something that had been hiding in plain sight for centuries. Dozens of buried temple towers and shrines, their stone crowns long since swallowed by the soil and the forest. Ground-penetrating radar then peered through the dense clay and laterite, picking out the precise outlines of walls and foundations that no eye had seen since the city was abandoned. One of the most striking findings was a set of structures that may belong to the outer enclosure of the Baphuon, a temple long known for its massive central pyramid, but whose outer walls had been thought lost or destroyed. The radar data traced a perfect rectangular perimeter around the main pyramid, lined with the bases of towers that once stood as sentinels. These were not just scattered ruins, they were part of an integrated architectural plan, a concentric layout of sacred spaces that had been erased from the surface but remained intact below. The discovery redraws the architectural footprint of the entire Angkorian period. Instead of a few famous monuments rising from a sea of jungle, the landscape now appears as a dense fabric of religious structures, each one a small piece of a vast ceremonial network. The towers and shrines were not isolated. They were connected by processional ways aligned to cardinal directions and positioned to create a layered experience for the pilgrim, moving from the outer gates through a succession of courtyards before reaching the central sanctuary. The fact that so many of these structures survived beneath the forest floor suggests that the true number of monuments at Angkor may be far higher than the 1,000 or so already catalogued. Every radar scan reveals new anomalies, subtle disturbances in the soil that hint at another platform, another wall, another entrance. Many of these features are too small or too degraded to see from the ground, but the sensors detect them with ease. The implication is profound. The Khmer Empire did not just build a few grand temples. It constructed a whole urban landscape of sacred architecture, layer upon layer, that has only now begun to give up its secrets. The same non-invasive tools that found the hidden towers are now being used to search for the missing outer walls of other major temple complexes across the region. Each new discovery adds a piece to the map, and each piece raises the question: how many more monuments are still sleeping beneath the roots, waiting for the next pulse of radar to bring them into the light? Beneath a towering earthen pyramid in central China, an underground palace has been sealed for over 2,000 years. The first emperor of a unified China, Qin Shi Huang, ordered the construction of a mausoleum that would mirror his earthly realm, complete with palaces, halls, and even rivers of flowing mercury meant to represent the waterways of the empire. Ancient historians describe this in vivid detail, but for centuries the account was treated with skepticism. Then, beginning in the early 2000s, ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery began to probe the massive burial mound near Zion. The scans revealed a dense, complex network of underground chambers far beyond the famous trenches containing the terracotta warriors. The radar signals had to penetrate layers of compacted earth and brick, reaching depths of nearly 100 feet, and the presence of mercury around the central tomb created a metallic haze that confused the sensors. Despite those challenges, the data consistently showed a large, central chamber surrounded by a series of smaller rooms, arranged in a pattern that matched the layout of a palace. The ancient accounts of mercury rivers were no longer a myth. The same soil samples that remote sensing helped target confirmed astonishingly high levels of mercury in the ground above the tomb, likely the result of liquid mercury seeping through cracks over centuries. The scale of the mausoleum is staggering. The known pits of terracotta warriors cover tens of thousands of square feet, but the underground palace alone may be 10 times larger. The scans hint at entire arsenals, storehouses, and even a model of the cosmos carved into the ceiling, all hidden beneath the hill. The design redraws the map of early imperial Chinese funerary architecture, showing that the first emperor's tomb was not simply a grave but a complete underground city, a final resting place that demanded the same engineering ambition as the Great Wall. The difficulty of scanning such a deep, metal-rich site continues to challenge researchers, but each new radar survey adds another layer of detail to that hidden blueprint. The terracotta warriors guard only the outermost boundaries of a much larger story, and the true heart of the mausoleum remains sealed, waiting for the day when technology can reveal its full design without disturbing the peace of the emperor who shaped a civilization. Far to the south, beneath the canopy of another great forest, a pattern of lines and shapes began to emerge from the satellite data. For decades, the Amazon basin was viewed as a pristine wilderness, a green sea where only small, scattered groups of hunter-gatherers ever lived. That image was so entrenched that when early explorers reported seeing earthworks and raised fields, their accounts were dismissed as exaggeration or fantasy. Then high-resolution satellite imagery and airborne LiDAR surveys swept across the western Amazon, in the Brazilian state of Acre and across the border into Bolivia, and the data told a very different story. Hundreds of geometric earthworks known as geoglyphs appeared in the scans. These were not natural formations. They were precise circles, squares, and octagons cut into the earth, some of them spanning hundreds of feet across, connected by straight lines and causeways. The LiDAR pulses had no trouble penetrating the leaves and branches, mapping the bare ground below with centimeter accuracy. Where the forest looked uniform from above, the sensors revealed a landscape carved by human hands. The geoglyphs themselves are remarkable. They were created by digging ditches and piling up the earth to form raised embankments, so that the shapes stand out as shallow depressions or low ridges. Many of them are arranged in clusters, with smaller enclosures nested inside larger ones, linked by pathways that run for miles through what is now dense rainforest. The sheer number of these features is staggering. In Acre alone, remote sensing has identified several hundred geoglyphs, and the count continues to rise with each new survey. Some researchers estimate that the total across the western Amazon could be well over 1,000. The implications redraw the map of pre-Columbian land use entirely. This was not an empty forest. It was a densely occupied and heavily modified landscape, shaped by sophisticated societies that existed long before European contact. The geoglyphs were not just random earthworks. They point to a complex culture with organized labor, shared ritual practices, and possibly a need for defense. The enclosures themselves are too large and too precisely aligned to be simple village boundaries. Many are oriented to the cardinal directions or to the positions of the sun and moon, suggesting they served ceremonial purposes, places where communities gathered for feasts, astronomical observations, or rites of passage. The straight causeways connecting different clusters hint at a network of movement, linking settlements and ritual centers across dozens of miles. Some researchers have proposed that the ditches and embankments also served a defensive function, creating boundaries that could slow or channel an approaching group. But the evidence so far points more strongly to religious and social gathering spaces, perhaps used seasonally when floodwaters receded and the forest opened up. The role of remote sensing in this discovery cannot be overstated. Without LiDAR and satellite imagery, these geoglyphs would remain invisible. The forest canopy hides them completely, and on the ground, the ditches are often filled with leaf litter and covered by thick undergrowth. Only by scanning from above and by processing the data to strip away the vegetation can archaeologists see the full pattern. The technology has allowed researchers to map these features without cutting a single tree, a crucial advantage in a region where deforestation is already a crisis. The findings have also sparked a major rethinking of Amazonian archaeology. The old model of a pristine wilderness with tiny, isolated bands of people is giving way to a vision of the Amazon as a cultural landscape, a garden engineered by human hands over thousands of years. The geoglyphs are just one piece of evidence. Alongside them, remote sensing has revealed raised fields for agriculture, terra preta soils enriched by charcoal, and even the outlines of large, permanent settlements, all of which point to populations far denser and societies far more complex than anyone imagined. The western Amazon was not an empty forest. It was a world of cities and ceremonies, of farmers and astronomers, all hidden beneath the trees until the lasers and satellites learned to see through the leaves. And as the surveys continue, more geoglyphs are being discovered every year, each one a new line in a story that is still being written. What other patterns might the forest still be hiding, waiting for the right wavelength of light to bring them into view? In Italy, a ghost city surrendered its full plan without a single excavation. Falerii Novi was a Roman town that flourished during the Republican period. then was abandoned and slowly buried under farmland. For centuries, only a few crumbling walls and a fragment of a church told the story of its existence. But in the early 2020s, an international team of archaeologists used ground-penetrating radar to map the entire municipal area, covering over 70 acres. The sensors sent pulses into the soil and listened for the echoes that bounced back from buried stone foundations. The data built a three-dimensional image of a complete Roman city, revealed at a depth of up to 2 meters without disturbing a single blade of grass. The resulting map shows a dense and meticulously planned urban grid. The streets are laid out in precise right angles, forming blocks of uniform size. The Forum, the central public square, appears as a large open space flanked by the outlines of temples, a basilica, and a market. The radar even traced the foundations of a large public bath complex, with its characteristic series of heated rooms and cold plunges. The city had a systematic water supply, with lead pipes and stone channels running beneath the streets. The gates in the city wall were positioned to align with the main roads, funneling traffic into the civic heart. What makes Falerii Novi so significant is the completeness of the data. Traditional excavation might uncover a few streets or a single building after years of work, but the ground-penetrating radar mapped the entire settlement in a matter of weeks. The survey revealed that the Roman town was not a haphazard growth of buildings around a central square. It was a unified design, likely laid out in a single planning period, reflecting a level of centralized authority and engineering skill that was not fully appreciated for the Republican era. Every block, every plaza, every public building followed a coherent vision. The non-invasive nature of the survey also allowed researchers to see how the city evolved over time. The radar data showed evidence of buildings being demolished and rebuilt, streets being widened, and new structures being inserted into existing blocks. Falerii Novi was not a static snapshot but a living organism that was modified over generations, even while maintaining its original grid. This discovery redraws the map of Roman urban planning in the Republican period. It demonstrates that Roman city founders were not simply copying Greek models. They were developing their own system of orthogonal grids, integrated with public infrastructure that would later be exported across the empire. The ghost town of Falerii Novi, silent under the Italian countryside, now speaks more clearly than any written text, its streets and temples etched into the radar data, waiting for the next generation of archaeologists to walk its invisible avenues. Across the dry plains of northern Mexico, satellite imagery pulled back a curtain on one of the most important trading cities of the pre-Columbian world. Paquimé, also known as Casas Grandes, had long been recognized as a major center of the Mogollon culture, a hub where turquoise, macors, and copper bells moved along ancient trade routes. But the true extent of that city remained buried under centuries of wind-blown dust and sparse desert vegetation. When high-resolution satellite images were analyzed, the patterns that emerged did not just confirm what was known. They redrew the entire blueprint of the settlement. The sensors picked up subtle variations in the color and texture of the soil, faint lines that traced the outlines of mounds that had been flattened or eroded beyond recognition from the ground. These were not random bumps in the landscape. They were the foundations of a vast urban network that included residential platforms, ceremonial plazas, and an intricate system of canals and reservoirs that brought water from distant springs. The satellite data revealed that Paquimé was not a loose cluster of adobe structures around a central plaza. It was a carefully planned city, laid out on a north-south axis, with its main plazas connected by a network of raised walkways and drainage channels. The mounds, once thought to be scattered, formed distinct neighborhoods, each with its own water storage and access to the central market area. The water control features were particularly telling. The satellites detected long, linear depressions that matched the signature of ancient irrigation ditches, dug to divert seasonal runoff into storage basins. At a time when the region was becoming increasingly arid, the people of Paquimé engineered a system that allowed them to sustain a population of several thousand, a remarkable feat in a land where surface water is scarce. The remote sensing data also showed that the city was protected by a series of low earthen walls and defensive terraces, suggesting that its wealth and influence made it a target. The layout redrew the map of Mogollon urbanism. Paquimé was not an outlier. It was the center of a network of smaller settlements, linked by trade and by a shared cultural identity that stretched across the harsh desert. The same satellite images that mapped the city's canals also revealed the routes of ancient roads connecting Paquimé to other sites, moving goods and ideas across hundreds of miles. In an arid environment where visibility from the ground is low, where the sun bakes the soil and wind scours the surface, remote sensing becomes an essential tool. It can see the faint traces of human labor that the naked eye would miss, the slight discoloration of a buried wall, the subtle depression of a filled-in canal, the geometric regularity of a plaza that nature could never create. Each new satellite pass adds another layer to the digital map, and each layer reveals a piece of the story of how people adapted to one of the most challenging environments on Earth. The dust and the heat had hidden Paquimé's full glory for centuries. Now the eyes in the sky are bringing it back into focus, one pixel at a time. What other desert cities might still be hiding their true shape under the glare of the sun, waiting for a satellite to trace their invisible boundaries? In the empty deserts of Saudi Arabia, satellites found thousands of stone rectangles. For years, these structures lay unnoticed, their low walls blending into the arid landscape, barely visible even to the sharpest eye on the ground. But when high-resolution satellite imagery was analyzed across the vast Arabian Peninsula, the pattern became unmistakable. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of large, rectangular enclosures appeared in the data, each one built from low stone walls, some measuring nearly 500 feet long. These are the Mustatils, and they are now recognized as some of the oldest large-scale structures in the entire region, dating back to the Neolithic period, over 7,000 years ago. The discovery redraws the map of ritual activity and social organization in the ancient Middle East, a place long thought to have been inhabited only by small, mobile bands of herders before the rise of urban civilizations. The Mustatils are not simple animal pens or boundary markers. Their design is too uniform, too deliberate. Each one consists of two long parallel walls, often with a platform or a small chamber at one end, oriented in such a way that they align with the open sky, perhaps pointing toward a specific star or the rising sun. Inside many of them, archaeologists have found deposits of animal bones, especially the horns and skulls of wild cattle and goats, suggesting that these enclosures served as ritual spaces, places where communities gathered for ceremonies, feasts, or offerings. The sheer number of Mustatils, now estimated in the thousands, indicates that this practice was not isolated. It was a widespread phenomenon, shared across a wide region by groups that were otherwise separate. That implies a level of social coordination and shared belief that was not previously appreciated for the Neolithic of Arabia. These people were not just surviving in a harsh environment. They were building monuments, maintaining traditions, and creating a landscape of shared ritual meaning that stretched for hundreds of miles. Since the satellite discovery, ground teams have been working to verify and date the Mustatils. Walking the sites on foot, they have been able to confirm that the stone walls are indeed ancient, with some of them built from local basalt blocks stacked without mortar. Radiocarbon dating of charcoal and bone fragments found inside the enclosures has placed their construction firmly in the 6th and 5th millennia before the Common Era, a time when the Arabian climate was wetter and grasslands supported wild cattle and other large game. Each new ground survey adds another layer of understanding. Some Mustatils have been found with additional features, such as small cairns or alignments that suggest astronomical observation. Others appear to be clustered around ancient water sources, hinting that these gatherings were tied to seasonal availability of resources. The combination of satellite imagery and fieldwork is painting a picture of a society far more complex than the old image of simple desert wanderers. These were people who came together at certain times of year, who built monumental architecture that required coordinated effort, and who left behind a legacy carved in stone that only now, from above, can we fully see. The desert of Arabia, long considered empty and timeless, is proving to be a landscape rich with human intention, each Mustatil a silent witness to gatherings that took place before the pyramids of Egypt, before the first cities of Mesopotamia, before almost any other large-scale human construction on Earth. And as the satellite surveys continue, more of these stone rectangles emerge from the dusty plains, each one a new sentence in a story that is only beginning to be read. In a quiet field in southeastern Norway, a Viking ship had been sleeping for 1,000 years. The land at Gjellestad looked unremarkable, just another stretch of farmland near the coast, with no visible sign of what lay beneath. But in 2018, a team of archaeologists from the Norwegian Institute for Cultural Heritage Research decided to scan the area with ground-penetrating radar. The sensors sent pulses into the soil and listened for the echoes that bounced back from buried objects. What returned from the ground was a ghost, a clear, unmistakable outline of a ship over 60 feet long, lying only a few feet below the surface. The radar data revealed the ship's keel in stunning detail, a long, curved line that traced the vessel's spine from stem to stern. Around it, the sensors also detected the remains of a large burial mound that had long since been ploughed flat, along with several smaller mounds, each one a silent marker of Viking Age funerary practice. The discovery redrew the map of Viking activity in southeastern Norway. Earlier archaeological evidence had placed the main centers of power further north, around the Oslo fjord and the interior valleys. Gjellestad, near the modern town of Halden, was not previously considered a major Viking site, but the ship burial, along with the surrounding mounds and traces of a nearby settlement, suggested that this area was once a significant hub, a place where influential families buried their dead with great ceremony. The ship itself was a rare find. Most Viking ship burials in Scandinavia had been excavated decades or even centuries ago, often with less precise methods. This one remained untouched, a time capsule preserved under the soil. The ground-penetrating radar not only located the ship but also gave researchers a clear picture of its condition, showing a well-defined keel and the faint lines of planking, all intact despite the centuries of ploughing and natural erosion. The detailed radar data allowed the team to plan a careful excavation, targeting the most promising areas without disturbing the entire site. The excavation that followed in 2020 and 21 confirmed what the radar had predicted. The ship was there, its wooden structure mostly decayed, but the iron rivets and the impression of its shape remained in the soil, allowing archaeologists to reconstruct its original form. The finds from the burial included the remains of a human burial, along with grave goods such as a sword, a spear, and the bones of several animals, likely sacrificed as part of the funeral rite. The entire site added a new chapter to the story of Viking Age Norway, showing that the region's political and social landscape was more complex than written records and earlier excavations had suggested. The fact that the ship had remained hidden for so long, waiting for a radar pulse to bring it into view, is a powerful reminder of how much history still lies beneath our feet, preserved not in museums but in the quiet fields where we walk every day. Gjellestad is now one of the best documented Viking ship burials ever studied, its secrets revealed not by accident or by a single lucky dig, but by a technology that lets us see the past without disturbing its sleep. Beneath the murky waters of the Mediterranean, another ancient city had been waiting. For centuries, the legendary harbor of Alexandria was known only from classical texts and scattered fragments of stone recovered by fishermen. The great lighthouse of Pharos, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, was said to have collapsed into the sea after a series of earthquakes. The island of Anterodos, where Cleopatra once held court, had vanished beneath the waves entirely. No one knew exactly how much of the Ptolemaic and Roman infrastructure still lay preserved under the sediment and saltwater. Then, in the 1990s and early 2000s, a team of marine archaeologists turned to a combination of sonar and ground-penetrating radar to probe the seabed. Sonar sends sound pulses through the water and measures how long they take to bounce back from the bottom. Ground-penetrating radar, adapted for underwater use, sends electromagnetic waves that can penetrate the seafloor itself, revealing structures buried under layers of sand and silt. The data these tools produced was stunning. The sonar mapped the submerged topography of the harbor in high resolution, showing a grid of fallen granite columns, broken sphinxes, and the foundations of massive buildings. The radar then peered beneath the seabed, tracing the outlines of stone docks, temple platforms, and long rows of warehouses that had once lined the waterfront. One of the most dramatic discoveries was the confirmation of the exact location of the lighthouse of Pharos. The sonar detected a large rectangular platform of stone blocks at the eastern edge of the harbor, surrounded by a field of collapsed masonry. The radar revealed that the platform itself was only the top layer. Beneath it lay a series of chambers and passageways that had been carved into the bedrock, likely used for storage or as a base for the lighthouse tower. The island of Anterodos, long thought to be a myth, appeared in the bathymetric data as a distinct raised area of the seabed, marked by the remains of a royal palace complex. The radar traced the outlines of several buildings, including what appeared to be a large reception hall and a series of smaller rooms arranged around a central courtyard. The technology also revealed a network of ancient canals and channels that had connected the island to the mainland, allowing boats to dock directly at the palace. The combination of sonar and radar allowed researchers to build a complete 3-dimensional map of the submerged city, covering an area of several square miles. The map showed that the harbor was not a simple natural bay but a carefully engineered landscape, with breakwaters, quays, and slipways designed to accommodate the largest ships of the Mediterranean. The warehouses were enormous, capable of storing grain and goods from across the empire. The discoveries redrew the map of Ptolemaic and Roman maritime infrastructure, showing that Alexandria was not just a center of learning and culture, but a massive commercial port that rivaled any in the ancient world. The water had not destroyed the city. In many ways, it had preserved it, sealing the ruins under a layer of protective sediment that shielded them from looters and erosion. The sonar and radar became the eyes of the archaeologists, allowing them to see a world that had been hidden for over 1,000 years. And as the technology improves, the data continues to reveal finer details, including the carved hieroglyphs and inscriptions on submerged obelisks that are too deep for divers to read. The ancient harbor of Alexandria is not lost. It is only waiting for the right frequency of sound or pulse of energy to bring its full story to the surface, one echo at a time. On a windswept hill in southern England, another lost city was waiting. The site of Old Sarum had long been known as an Iron Age hill fort, a place where ancient Britons once gathered for defense and trade. A few crumbling walls and the outline of a Norman castle stood as reminders of later occupation, but for most of the 20th century, historians viewed it as a relatively simple, short-lived settlement, important in its time but ultimately overshadowed by the founding of Salisbury Cathedral just 2 miles to the south. That view was turned on its head when an airborne LiDAR survey swept across the grassy mound in the early 2010s. The laser pulses fired from a small aircraft traveled through the turf and topsoil, recording the elevation of the ground beneath with centimeter precision. When the data was processed, the hill fort vanished, replaced by something far more sophisticated. The LiDAR revealed a dense urban grid of streets, stone foundations, and building platforms that had been deliberately leveled and smoothed over centuries of agriculture and erosion. Where the naked eye saw only gentle slopes and scattered lumps of masonry, the lasers traced the outlines of a complete Norman-planned city. There was the castle, its walls and towers mapped in detail, far larger and more elaborate than the surviving ruins suggested. There was the original cathedral, a massive Romanesque structure that had been dismantled stone by stone when the clergy moved to Salisbury. And there were blocks of houses, arranged along straight streets that converged on a central marketplace, just like any medieval borough. The entire complex, covering over 50 acres, had been deliberately erased from the landscape, its stones reused and its foundations buried under soil and grass. The redrawn map contradicted the long-held belief that Old Sarum was primarily a hill fort with a few later additions. It showed that the Normans had not just built a castle on an old hill. They had transformed the entire summit into a fully functioning urban center, complete with a cathedral, a mint, and a civilian population. The city was a planned colonial foundation, designed to project Norman power into the heart of Anglo-Saxon territory. And when the clergy abandoned it for the new cathedral at Salisbury, the old city was not simply abandoned. It was systematically demolished and its materials carted away, leaving only the ghost of its foundations behind. The LiDAR survey did more than just reveal those ghostly lines. It demonstrated the immense value of this technology for detecting buried topography, especially on sites that have been heavily modified by later activity. Traditional excavation would have taken years and cost a fortune, and it would have destroyed the very surface that holds the clues. LiDAR, by contrast, mapped the entire site in a single afternoon without disturbing a single blade of grass. The data now serves as a permanent digital record of a lost medieval city, one that had been hiding in plain sight for 800 years. What other English hills might hold the foundations of forgotten towns, waiting for a laser pulse to bring their streets back into the light? High above the Urubamba River, the famous Inca citadel of Machu Picchu had one more secret to surrender. For decades, tourists and scholars alike marveled at the precision of its stonework and the drama of its mountain setting. The site, rediscovered in the early 20th century by Hiram Bingham, was already considered one of the most complete and best-preserved Inca settlements ever found. Its terraces, temples, and residential quarters were visible to any visitor walking its paths, but the dense cloud forest that surrounds the citadel, a tangle of orchids, moss, and towering trees, had swallowed entire sections of the Inca landscape. Only by looking from above, through the canopy, could the full extent of the city be understood. In the early 2020s, a team of archaeologists from a joint Peruvian and international project launched a LiDAR survey that covered over 40 square miles of the mountainous terrain around Machu Picchu. The laser pulses fired from a helicopter sliced through the thick vegetation and mapped the ground with a precision of just a few inches. What emerged from the data was a revelation. The LiDAR detected dozens of structures that had never been recorded before, scattered across the steep slopes and hidden valleys that framed the famous citadel. These were not isolated huts or simple shelters. They were carefully planned buildings, arranged in clusters along a network of Inca roads that had also remained invisible from the ground. The largest group of new finds was a residential sector, a collection of over a dozen structures connected by a series of stone stairways and terraces. The radar showed the outlines of walls, doorways, and even the internal divisions of rooms, all buried under centuries of leaf litter and soil. This was not a minor expansion of the known site. It was an entire neighborhood, a place where the people who served the citadel, the farmers, the laborers, the families of the elite, had lived and worked, their homes hidden from the tourist trails by the dense forest. The implications redraw the map of Inca urban planning in the region. Machu Picchu was not an isolated royal retreat for the Emperor Pachacuti and his retinue, as earlier interpretations suggested. It was the center of a much larger settlement, a network of satellite communities that supported the citadel through agriculture, trade, and ritual. The newly discovered structures lined up with Inca trails that connected Machu Picchu to other important sites in the Sacred Valley, showing that the citadel was part of an integrated system of movement and control. The terraces, too, were far more extensive than anyone had imagined. The LiDAR data revealed long, stepped platforms cut into the mountainsides, some of them over a mile in length, designed to prevent erosion and to create flat ground for farming in the steep terrain. These terraces were not just agricultural. Many of them had drainage channels carved into the stone, directing water to storage cisterns and to the residential areas below. The Inca engineers had transformed the rugged slopes into a managed landscape, one that could support a population far larger than the few hundred people who could have lived inside the main citadel itself. The logistical advantages of LiDAR in this environment are immense. The cloud forest around Machu Picchu is one of the most challenging places on Earth for ground-based archaeology. The slopes are incredibly steep, often exceeding 45 degrees, and the vegetation is so dense that it can take hours to cover just a few hundred feet on foot. Visibility is low, and the risk of injury from falls or from encounters with wildlife is constant. Traditional survey methods, where archaeologists walk the terrain and look for surface features, would take years to cover even a fraction of the area that LiDAR mapped in a single day. And even then, many of the structures were so completely covered by moss and soil that they would have been invisible to the naked eye, even from a few feet away. The laser pulses, by contrast, see through all of that. They record the bare earth beneath the vegetation, revealing the subtle geometry of Inca stonework that nature had reclaimed. The data now serves as a permanent digital record of the entire landscape around Machu Picchu, a map that can be revisited, analyzed, and compared with future surveys to monitor changes over time. The discoveries at Machu Picchu are not just about adding dots to a map. They are about understanding how the Inca people thought about and used their environment. They did not just build a single, isolated monument on a mountain peak. They created an entire territory, a network of farms, roads, and residences that was designed to work in harmony with the landscape, not against it. The citadel of Machu Picchu was the visible heart of that system, but the LiDAR data shows that its pulse was felt far beyond its stone walls, in the hidden neighborhoods that are only now emerging from the forest. What other high-altitude Inca secrets might still be waiting under the canopy, preserved by the very conditions that make them so hard to reach? Deep in the Honduran rainforest, a legend drew explorers into a green hell. For centuries, stories spoke of a lost white city, a place of immense wealth and power hidden somewhere in the Mosquitia region, a vast, swampy wilderness infested with venomous snakes, biting insects, and tropical diseases. The tales were dismissed as fantasy, the kind of myth that arises from the fever dreams of conquistadors and prospectors. But in 2012, an airborne LiDAR survey changed everything. A team of archaeologists and filmmakers working with the Honduran government flew a small aircraft over the dense canopy of the Rio Platono Biosphere Reserve, one of the most remote and inaccessible places on Earth. The laser pulses cut through the leaves and branches, mapping the ground below with a precision that had never been attempted in this region. what emerged from the data was not a single structure or a vague anomaly. It was a whole landscape of human settlement, raised platforms, plazas, mounds, and even the outlines of what appeared to be a pyramid, all arranged in a deliberate pattern that could only be the work of a sophisticated society. The discovery was electrifying. This was not a small village or a temporary camp. It was a lost city, and it matched the description of the legendary White City, also known as the City of the Monkey God. Remote sensing had found a place that generations of explorers had searched for in vain, a place so treacherous that even modern expeditions had failed to penetrate its depths. The findings redrew the map of pre-Columbian settlement in Central America. This region, long considered a sparsely populated buffer zone between the Maya and the peoples of South America, was now shown to have been home to a distinct, previously unknown culture. The LiDAR data revealed a network of causeways connecting the main plaza to smaller satellite structures, suggesting a planned urban layout that required centralized authority and organized labor. The mounds themselves were not random piles of earth. They were carefully shaped platforms that once supported wooden buildings, their foundations sunk deep into the clay, their orientation aligned to cardinal directions. And scattered among these features, ground teams later found fragments of stone sculptures, including the head of a jaguar and what appeared to be a ceremonial throne, all carved in a style that did not match any known Maya or Aztec tradition. The controversy that followed was as thick as the jungle itself. Some archaeologists questioned whether the LiDAR data truly proved the existence of a complex civilization, arguing that the features could be natural formations or the remains of a few simple farming communities. Others pointed to the lack of extensive ground verification, noting that the area was too dangerous for prolonged fieldwork. The skeptics had a point, but they were soon answered. In the years that followed, a series of ground expeditions, supported by the LiDAR maps and using GPS to navigate the dense forest, confirmed the presence of dozens of additional structures, including a cache of stone vessels and a ceremonial cache of finely carved objects that left no doubt about the sophistication of the people who built them. The role of airborne scanning in this discovery cannot be overstated. The Musquisha region is a nightmare for ground-based archaeology. There are no roads, no trails that stay open for long. The canopy is so thick that sunlight barely reaches the forest floor, and the humidity rots equipment and clothing within days. The rivers flood unpredictably, and the wildlife, from jaguars to fer-de-lance vipers, poses a constant threat to human life. Traditional survey methods would have taken decades, cost millions, and likely resulted in injury or worse. LiDAR bypassed all of that. It mapped the entire area from the safety of the air, providing a high-resolution blueprint that allowed ground teams to target the most promising locations without wasting time or risking lives. The lost city of the monkey god was not a myth. It was a real place built by a people who thrived in one of the most challenging environments on Earth, and their legacy was preserved not in stone temples that tourists visit, but in the data files of a laser scanner waiting for the world to see. What other green hells might still be hiding entire civilizations under their canopy, their plazas and pyramids silent and patient, until the next flight of a LiDAR-equipped plane brings them into the story of human achievement. Beneath the mud of the Tiber Delta, the imperial harbor that fed Rome lay hidden for centuries. The site of Portus, built by the emperors Claudius and Trajan, was described in ancient texts as a wonder of engineering, a vast complex of warehouses, canals, and basins that funneled grain, olive oil, wine, and luxury goods from across the Mediterranean into the capital. But for generations, only scattered ruins and a few surviving inscriptions hinted at its true scale. The rest had been buried under silt and farmland, absorbed by the slow shifting of the Tiber River over 2 millennia. Then, in the early 2000s, a team of archaeologists launched one of the most ambitious multi-sensor surveys ever attempted at a single archaeological site. They combined high-resolution satellite imagery, aerial photographs from both modern aircraft and historical archives, magnetometry that could detect buried walls by their effect on the Earth's magnetic field, and ground-penetrating radar that sent pulses into the soil and listened for the echoes off buried foundations. Each sensor contributed a different piece of the puzzle, and when the data was layered together, a complete city of storage and movement emerged from the ground. The satellite images showed subtle discolorations in the crops growing above the buried ruins, outlining the vast rectangular shape of the main warehouse district. The magnetometry traced the iron-rich traces of collapsed roofs and the magnetic signatures of kilns and hearths that once kept the harbor workers warm. And the ground-penetrating radar revealed the precise alignment of canals and basins, dug deep into the clay that connected the port to the Tiber and allowed ships to unload directly onto the quays. The most dramatic discovery was the size of the warehouses themselves. The largest of them, the Grandi Magazzini di Settimia, stretched for nearly a quarter of a mile, a single building designed to store enough grain to feed the entire population of Rome for months. The radar data showed that this structure was not a simple hall but a grid of thick supporting walls, creating dozens of separate chambers, each one accessible by a separate door from the canal side. The water channels themselves were a complex network, with locks and sluice gates that regulated the flow between the saltwater harbor and the freshwater Tiber, preventing the port from silting up and allowing ships to be moved between basins without relying on the tide. The survey also revealed the presence of a large, previously unknown basin, a perfectly rectangular depression that had been filled in and forgotten, likely used for ship repair or as a waiting area for vessels queuing to unload. The entire complex covered over 200 acres, making it one of the largest artificial harbors of the ancient world. The data redrew the map of Roman commercial infrastructure, showing that the supply chain that kept the capital alive was not a simple matter of ships docking at a single quay. It was a highly organized system of transshipment, storage, and redistribution, managed by a specialized workforce and designed to operate year-round, even in the unpredictable weather of the Tyrrhenian Sea. The multi-sensor approach proved essential because no single technique could have captured the full picture. Satellite imagery saw the large-scale geometry, magnetometry detected the buried metal and kilns, and radar provided the vertical dimension, showing how deep the foundations went and how the water channels sloped to allow gravity drainage. Together, they built a three-dimensional model of a port that was not just a collection of buildings but a hydraulic machine, a place where the empire's wealth was measured, taxed, and stored before being sent upriver to the markets of Rome. The harbor that once fed an empire had never truly disappeared. It had simply been waiting for the right combination of eyes to see through the centuries of silt and time, one pulse at a time. The same sensors that traced the imperial harbor beneath the Tiber Delta are now scanning every corner of the planet, and the story they tell is rewriting the entire map of human history. Over these 30 discoveries, remote sensing has done far more than add new dots to a map. It has transformed our understanding of what ancient societies were capable of, how they organized their cities, how they moved water and goods, how they worshipped, and how they adapted to some of the most challenging environments on Earth. From the hidden capital of a Roman province in Germany to the dense residential neighborhoods of Cahokia, from the ritual geoglyphs of the Amazon to the lost city buried under Honduran jungle, each finding has challenged a long-held assumption. The old model of archaeology, where knowledge came only from digging down through layers of soil and stone, has been joined by something far more powerful: the ability to see entire landscapes without disturbing a single layer of history. LiDAR lasers, ground-penetrating radar pulses, satellite imagers, and muon detectors have become the new eyes of the field, revealing cities, roads, canals, and ceremonial centers that were invisible to every previous generation. The paradigm shift is profound. Instead of asking where to dig, archaeologists now ask what the sensors can see. Instead of spending years opening a single trench, they can map 100 square miles in a single flight. Instead of destroying the very evidence they seek, they can preserve it forever in digital form, a permanent record that can be revisited, analyzed, and compared for decades to come. The discoveries covered in this journey are just the beginning. Beneath the forests of Southeast Asia, the deserts of Arabia, the farmlands of Europe, and the ice sheets of Greenland, countless other sites are still waiting. Every satellite pass, every radar scan, every laser pulse adds a new line to an unfinished atlas of human achievement. If you want to follow along as these stories unfold, hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. And let us know in the comments which of these 30 discoveries surprised you the most. Was it the hidden void inside the Great Pyramid, the drowned harbor of Alexandria, or the 1,000 geoglyphs carved into the Amazon floor? Share this video with someone who loves history, because the story of our past is being rewritten not with shovels and brushes, but with photons and echoes. The ground beneath our feet still holds secrets, and the next sensor to fly overhead might just reveal a world we never knew existed, one that has been waiting, silent and patient for the eyes of the sky.